Coming up.
It's not what you said in your letter, though, sir. You said in your letter that there was an ongoing investigation, and yet here we have this information. I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on how did this person fly under the radar for 6 years?
Do you really think that the system is working if somebody like this, who's an alleged ISIS terrorist, who, if he was even a little bit more productive, would have resulted in mass casualties in Toronto? Do you really think that that's how the system should work? Do you really think that this is not a colossal failure of your government?
The video that led to all of this was from 2015. So there was 9 years before the video that led to the arrest was filmed.
The video titled Deterring Spies was published in June 2015 by the media arm of the ISIS branch in western Iraq, according to an expert. Now we know that Mr. Eldidi received his citizenship in September 2023. I'm looking at the chronology under security screening note. Application was referred to CSIS for security checks in November 2023. CSIS returned a favorable recommendation.
Like and subscribe.
The committee is meeting to study the review of the foiled terrorist plot in Toronto and of the security screening process for permanent residence and citizenship application. I want to remind members that there is currently a Section 517 publication ban in place. A Section 517 publication ban prohibits the publication of any information, evidence, or representations made at or in anticipation of a bail hearing. Any bail conditions, reasons of the bail court, and any evidence or materials relied upon at the bail hearing are prohibited from disclosure. So I'd like to now welcome the witnesses. We have appearing today, we have the Honourable Domonic Leblanc, Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs. Welcome, Minister. Sure. We will now start our questions with Mr. Caputo. 6 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. And I echo your sentiments where you thank our security services and responders for foiling what sounds like it would have been a serious terrorist attack that would have impacted Canadians. Now, Minister, to be clear here, this person who is charged with terrorism offenses with his son, he arrived in February of 2018, correct? I'm going off the information you gave me, Minister.
Yes, in February 5th, 2018, the subject entered Canada at Pearson Airport.
And he made an asylum claim in June of 2018, correct?
Yes, he went to an immigration department office and made that asylum claim.
And he was granted citizenship in May of 2024, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And provided a work permit in September of 2018. That was that was the initial basis on which he was able to legally be in Canada. Is that right?
Yes, that appears correct from the chronology before the committee.
Okay. Permanent resident of September of 2021. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Now, you wrote me a letter on August 12th of this year stating none of this. So I'm just going to note here for the record that you said, Minister, that we couldn't comment on any of this, and then lo and behold, here today we have this vast chronology that has appeared just before committee. It seems odd that you would say you couldn't give us any of this information, and that here today we have all of this information from you. What we have here, Minister, is obviously a colossal failure. I'll be direct. How did somebody slide under the radar for so long, 2018 to 2024?
So just with respect to your initial comment, you're right. In August, I thought it was important, and I asked, as did my colleague Mark Miller, our officials to produce the detailed chronology. So I wanted to make sure that when we came to this committee and are able to talk about this publicly, we had the precise chronology that we could all rely on.
That's not what you said in your letter, though, sir. You said in your letter that there was an ongoing investigation, and yet here we have this information. I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on how did this person fly under the radar for 6 years?
So this person entered Canada on the dates that you described, Mr. Caputo, and as our reflected in the chronology. The security services, CBSA, CSIS, and the Immigration Department did all of the existing security checks and the normal security checks, and including biometrics by the RCMP on a number of occasions. And there was, at the time that those decisions were made, no information that would have come to light to trigger what happened earlier this spring in terms of CSIS's investigation.
In fact, we actually had to hear from a foreign government about this. Isn't that right? That CSIS got information from a foreign government has been reported by Global?
You have been, Mr. Caputo, at this committee for some time. You know that the intelligence agencies are not going to ever discuss the sources of intelligence or information they get from partner agencies. First of all, it may be illegal to disclose that, but it's also very dangerous to the women and men who do that work, either at CSIS or in their partner agencies, to confirm the sources of this information.
Well,
so I'm not able to give a definitive answer on that question, and you know that very well.
Equally as troubling as that answer is the fact that we as Canadians did not have this intelligence for ourselves. How is it that foreign governments know more than we do on Canadian soil?
I don't accept the premise of that comment. Every intelligence agency collaborates with partners around the world. The most effective and the most renowned intelligence cooperation would be the Five Eyes countries, of which, as you know, Canada is a member, and the information is shared between these security services on an hourly and daily basis, precisely because it makes our country safer, but we can also contribute and do often, and the great work done by CSIS, to the security of our partner countries as well. So that's a very normal security process that you understand very well.
With all due respect, Minister, you need to stop deflecting and start divulging. At this point here, you're saying, you're not even confirming it. How is it that a foreign government knew more than we did in Canada about somebody that was on Canadian soil for 6 years? How is that?
But, Mr. Caputo, perhaps I wasn't clear in the previous answer. You understand very well, and I'm happy to ask the interim director of CSIS to explain the reasons why it is inappropriate, if not illegal, to answer questions around specific intelligence products, and more so because this is an ongoing criminal case. Some of this evidence, the prosecutors in their judgment may decide to bring before a court, before a jury at some future prosecution.
I'm not talking about the evidence. I'm talking about how the evidence was gathered. How is it that a foreign government knew more than our own government? That's what I'm talking about, not the evidence, sir. At the end of the day, this is what we have. We have somebody that came in here and was here for 6 years flying under the radar. We don't know whether this happened before, and we have no assurances from you whether or not this will happen again. You've deflected, you've diverted, and you've denied, and that is absolutely inexcusable to this point. Canadians deserve answers, and we are getting none. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. The Minister can answer if he wishes.
Mr. Caputo can repeat those phrases and those words. It doesn't make them true. What you have here, Mr. Chair, is a case where two individuals were arrested and are now in custody facing 9 very serious criminal charges. This was a situation that could have presented a serious risk to the safety of Canadians, and CSIS and the RCMP and other police partners did phenomenal work. I am fortunate enough as the Minister of Public Safety, as I said, to be updated, to be briefed from time to time on some of these significant cases. That was the case for me on July 24th, and 4 days later, these people were in police custody. So I saw up close the very effective work that the RCMP, CSIS, and others did. So the premise that somehow this person flew under the radar, this person was arrested and is facing criminal charges and is in jail before any risk was presented to Canadians, and that's exactly the kind of work that we rely on our police services, the RCMP, and their partners like CSIS to do every day, and I'm proud of that work.
I do take issue sometimes when the opposition members say that other international security agencies knew more than we did, and certainly I'm for one to say, well, I'm not really too worried on who knows what. But as long as we, foiled a terrorist plot in this country, it doesn't matter. And I'm glad the Five Eyes all work together, including Canada, and in every regard. But Minister, Canadians need to understand and want to know, what's our interest in the details in this case are obvious, but we also want to ensure procedural fairness for a successful prosecution. So can you just elaborate on the processes that we're going to follow here so Canadians in layman terms can understand how we're going to get to the end of this and ensure that it never happens again?
So, Mr. McDonald, thank you for the question. Thank you for joining us, I hope, from the great province of Prince Edward Island this morning. And you're absolutely right. As my colleague, the Minister of Immigration, has said, and I have said the same thing, and the officials with me today are working on precisely that, a review of all of the steps surrounding this case with the relevant dates to understand exactly who knew what and when. And are there changes or adjustments that need to be made in terms of these screening protocols? Our adversaries, threat actors that are seeking to do harm to Canada or to do harm to Canadians, are constantly evolving their measures and adjusting their measures. CSIS has talked about this publicly. So obviously, the public safety portfolio and the agencies in the portfolio are also evolving measures to ensure that we have the very best measures in place to ensure the safety of Canadians. Mr. McDonald, your specific question around what reviews are taking place to ensure that we have this information, perhaps Mr. Gallivan from the Border Services Agency or Ms. Lloyd from CSIS can talk about briefly the work they're doing. And of course, our colleagues at the Immigration Department are doing that same work and in some cases overlapping with us. Perhaps Mr. Gallivan could add something?
Just in terms of the review, so we're both reviewing these specific individuals and back testing what occurred, were procedures followed, and if procedures were followed, what changes to procedures may be required. We're also taking a representative sample of closed files that were similarly screened positive to see, in light of the information available today, whether there are changes to the procedures needed. And then, as the Minister said, there's three lines of defense. The CBSA's first involvement is actually in the security screening process before people are issued a visa or status in Canada. In 2023, 7,000 people had various levels of concern expressed through that process. We have liaison officers situated around the world. Before people get on a plane, roughly 7,500 people were no-boarded before they even got on a plane to Canada. And then, kind of from a CBSA perspective, when you arrive in Canada in 2023, 35,000 people allowed to leave did not enter the country, and roughly 3,500 people, because of serious inadmissibility concerns, which are not just national security but organized crime and others, were stopped. And so I think what I'm trying to say is we do have checks and balances that work thousands of times a year, but we're asking ourselves the same tough questions about were the procedures followed, and if they were and didn't catch this individual, could different procedures catch them in the future?
Mr. Chair, if there's time, perhaps Ms. Lloyd can talk about CSIS doing some of that work in partnership as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The service has an important work in the security screening process, and I can provide assurances to the committee that the existing procedures are robust and that we take the time and necessary effort with the information available at the time to treat every file seriously to make sure we adequately and effectively execute our mandate and authorities under the security screening mandate of the CSIS Act. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald, you have a minute and a half left, or a minute and a quarter.
Thank you. Look, recently we've seen another jurisdiction, as recently as last week, I believe it was in Germany, where individuals have attempted to carry out terrorist acts in the name of Islamic State. Can anyone there speak to the experience or lessons that we may have learned from that situation?
Mr. Chair, I see Deputy Commissioner Larkin reach for a piece of paper. That may very well be because he has something he could add to that question. Brian, are you able to offer something?
Thank you, Mr. Minister. In that particular incident, no specific information, but generally speaking, as this committee would be well aware, the national security context, terrorism cases across the globe are becoming much more complex, much more frequent. I do want to highlight within Canada, though, the violent extremism is significantly on the rise. Between April 1st, 2023 and March 31st, 2024, where the RCMP has laid 83 charges against 25 accused persons, and 7 of those being young persons, which is concerning around the ideology and the radicalization. And when you look at this from a larger perspective, the number of charges year over year, 488% increase. And so the global context is changing significantly. It's something within the RCMP that we continue to evolve. Our integrated national security teams across the country, particularly located in large urban areas, to actually combat this. But as Mr. Gallivan and Madame Lloyd indicated, the important partnership is with our Five Eye partners and that global connection. Thank you.
The son requested a study permit in July 2019. He then came to Canada in February 2020. And he obtained a refugee status in July 2022. But you've mentioned 2024. It seems a bit delayed, Mr. Gallivan. Am I getting something wrong here? Did you get the dates mixed up? If you could please give me one moment to consult the chronology, I can provide you with precise information. What I can confirm is that the son was screened once through the same process under which the father was screened twice. I only have about 30 seconds left. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Was the in-depth screening requested for both the father and the son? Also, was it carried out? And third, when was it carried out? And what were the results of the screening? For the son, I think we're experiencing some confusion. I was very clear for the father. As for the son, I will come back to you. For the father, I can confirm that he was screened in 2018 and 2021. All procedures were followed in the normal ways.
So I guess a direct question to you, Minister, given how important this information is to aid this committee in a very important and now very public investigation into this matter, why did it take so long, given that the letter requesting this particular meeting, my letter was issued on August the 7th. Here we are on August the 28th. Can you give us, the committee, a reason as to why these documents were given to the committee so late?
Mr. McGregor, through the chair, thank you for the question and thank you for your participation this morning. I'm happy to see you. You referred to, as all of us as constituency MPs asked for chronologies from the Immigration Department with respect to particular files. That's a process that the Immigration Department endeavors to provide. I hope that colleagues will understand in this case, you're dealing with 2 individuals facing 9 very serious terrorism charges, criminal charges that are currently in custody. There is an active prosecution underway and a publication ban issued by the court. So the ability of the Immigration Department or even CBSA or CSIS to simply produce a timeline necessarily has to go through the filter of the RCMP to ensure we're not prejudicing inadvertently a criminal prosecution. I know lawyers from the Department of Justice were providing advice. The public safety senior officials were getting advice from lawyers. So recognizing that it should have been here earlier, Mr. McGregor, and for that I regret, but I wanted to make sure we didn't rush something that inadvertently became in a criminal trial, a reason to perhaps have an adverse finding or an adverse result. And I wanted to make sure that the RCMP and the prosecutors, the Department of Justice, were comfortable that we were releasing the maximum amount of information we can without in any way endangering a criminal prosecution or risking violating a publication ban that the court has seen fit to put in place.
We'll start our second rounds of questions now with Ms. Landsman. Please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Minister, I'm going to jump right in my questions because you've had a month to answer these questions. But you said in your opening statement, I'm going to quote you, "This is the way that the investigative and national security system should work." Your government issued a visa to somebody who was allegedly in a 2015 ISIS propaganda video, who then planned a mass casualty event outside of Toronto with a target in our city, in our country's largest city. The RCMP foiled that plot with intelligence from the French. Are you really telling Canadians that that's how our system should work? He's been here for 6 years.
Mr. Chair, what I'm saying to Canadians is that the moment the government of Canada became aware of concerning information regarding this individual, all of the appropriate steps were put in place by CSIS and the RCMP, which culminated in the arrest on the 28th of July. And thank God, as Ms. Landsman said, the potential serious risk or violence was averted. With respect to the information regarding the immigration processing, the Immigration Department will be here later and are in a position to speak to the specific steps that an applicant, whether for asylum or permanent residency, and we're looking at the security check system.
Yes, Minister, by my count, there's about 6 security checks in the documents that you dumped on this committee 50 minutes before it started. Do you really think that the system is working if somebody like this, who's an alleged ISIS terrorist, who, if he was even a little bit more productive, would have resulted in mass casualties in Toronto? Do you really think that that's how the system should work? Do you really think that this is not a colossal failure of your government?
I am very proud of the work that the RCMP and CSIS did in thwarting this particular case. I think, as Mr. Gallivan indicated, if you look at the tens and hundreds of thousands of these cases that are reviewed every year as people seek asylum, submit asylum claims, or apply for various visas, we necessarily rely on the work of our security agencies. We're always looking at ways to strengthen and evolve that posture as the threat context, as Ms. Lloyd said, evolves. But in this case, I am satisfied that when the government of Canada was aware or could possibly have been aware of this information, all of the steps were taken.
They were aware 6 years ago when he came in. And speaking of that, we heard speculation,
Ms. Glassman, you can't assert something like that if you're...
He's been here for 6 years. It's just a known fact from your own documents.
But you said to assert that people were aware of some information that came to light recently 6 years ago is wrong.
There is speculation that he was brought in under the Syrian refugee program. Is this correct, yes or no?
I'm not sure I can speculate on the particular immigration status and program, and I'm not sure what part of that might be subject to the criminal trial, but you could certainly ask the Immigration Department that question.
Do you believe that if he was brought under this, if he was brought in through this stream, the government promised increased screening on asylum seekers in this country? Do you believe that after everything we know today, that your government is doing its job on that?
But again, I don't want to give credence to the premise that you ask because I don't have that information. So I want to be very precise that you don't link his arrival to a particular immigration program. The Immigration Department, I think, can provide you with those facts. I don't have them, but I don't want, in answering your question, to appear to confirm that because I don't have that information. I am satisfied that both the security services and the RCMP with the Immigration Department have in place a series of rigorous screening and background checks that take place. You heard Ted talk about biometric screening, 6 different databases. We heard the interim director of CSIS talk about 300 agreements, 150 different countries. We have access to a great amount of information to keep Canadians safe, and we need to make sure that that information is used in the most expeditious way possible.
This person was brought into Canada 6 years before a terrorist plot was foiled, just days before they would have killed people in Toronto. And you're telling Canadians that you're satisfied with the screening processes in place.
As I said in my opening comments, this person and the nature of the allegations which ultimately led to the investigation and arrest came to our attention in June. And this person from that point on was obviously under the appropriate surveillance to ensure that any threat was mitigated and led to the ultimate arrest on the 28th of July.
Thank you, Ms. Landsman. We go now to Mr. Gerritsen.
I take issue, or I recognize that Mr. Caputo seems to take issue with the fact that this information was given to Canada that assisted us in coming to the conclusion that we did. But the reality is that Canada is a net importer of information. And as a matter of fact, if you think of all the agencies throughout the different countries that would work together, every agency would end up being a net importer. That's the whole purpose to coming together with other countries to share information, so that we can all benefit from it. That being said, can you talk a little bit about the risks, Minister, with disclosing the exact details of how CSIS may have become aware of the threat posed to us?
Mr. Gerritsen, thank you for the question. I can certainly, based on briefings I've had over the last year and a month from CSIS, offer a view, and perhaps Ms. Lloyd could add something. The reason why CSIS, or people like me who may have access to some of this information in the routine course of my job, don't confirm or identify particular sources or partner countries, as you said, that are sharing information with us, and we would, of course, share information that we gather with those same countries, is because it can, if we're confirming both the tradecraft, the way that these intelligence agencies gather information, if we confirm it's agency X and not agency Y, perhaps some of these bad threat actors will be able to identify either human sources who would be at huge risk, you can understand what that would mean, or be able to understand the tradecraft, the very sophisticated and effective way that CSIS and other agencies gather this information in order to protect Canadians. So that's why every previous government has been very prudent, and that's why the Security of Information Act also provides criminal sanctions for those that cross the line. But perhaps Vanessa can add something specific, or Mark?
Yeah, and I do actually have another question that maybe you could answer as well, Interim Director Lloyd. If I'm not mistaken, today's the 1 month anniversary since the individuals were arrested. And I've personally never seen a chronology of events be disclosed to the public so quickly, despite the fact that I'm hearing from across the table that my colleagues are concerned about how quickly this was released. Are you aware, Interim Director, of any other cases where the details have been released so quickly to the public?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Honourable Member, it is our objective to be as transparent as we can with Canadians. Safety and security of Canadians and Canada's interests is of paramount importance to our organization, as well as to our security partners that join us here today. I can also say that it is equally important, as the Minister referenced, to be very vigilant with regards to disclosure of specific facts. As the Minister referenced, this can allow for our adversaries to learn where they went wrong, and providing a roadmap to them to change their methods will have the impact of making it more difficult to detect these threats. And equally, we hope to be able to preserve the capabilities, the methodologies, and the tradecraft that the Minister referenced of our service to address those threats.
And I appreciate that, but Minister, and I appreciate your diligence in answering that question. Are you aware, Minister, can you think of any other time that information was released this quickly as we've seen it released on this particular case?
Certainly, Mr. Gerritsen, not in the time that I've been Minister, because I think we recognize, and my colleague Mark Miller said so publicly, we recognize the understandable questions that Canadians had when they learned following the RCMP news release of these arrests. I think it is reasonable for the government and for Canadians to ask, well, how could this sequence of events that we've laid out before the committee take place, and what can we learn from that sequence of events to ensure the very best measures are in place? So that's the work that's ongoing. But we thought it was important to lay that out for Canadians. But I hope people understood in my opening comments when I said very clearly that in the month of June, when CSIS became aware of some of this concerning information, they immediately took all of the necessary measures to ensure that the threat was managed or mitigated. I may not be using the right technical term. The RCMP were involved as well. And then we saw the successful arrest on the 28th of July. These people remain in custody, in jail. Their bail was denied. And there will be a prosecution. So in our system, and you know this very well, Mr. Gerritsen, that should be the objective in terms of keeping Canadians safe. And I'm confident that this case, once the details come out, I hope in a trial, once a jury or a judge is able to evaluate the evidence, Canadians will understand perhaps how these cases can successfully be handled.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure that the two former Crown prosecutors that are sitting at this table would understand that very well.
According to the chronology, in June 2024, CSIS learned about the threat. However, the video that led to all of this was from 2015. So there was 9 years before the video that led to the arrest was filmed, and CSIS learned about a threat. Can you explain to me how this could be the case? How is it that our security services were unaware of this video before June of 2024? Mr. Fortin, it's an entirely reasonable question, and I understand why you are asking it. But just to be entirely clear, I asked Mr. Larkin why we are unable to comment on the supposed video. Mr. Larkin, can you please explain this context to Mr. Fortin?
Merci, Monsieur Ministre.
Thank you, Minister.
In addition to the emergence in the media of a video, it would be very difficult and irresponsible for me to speak specifically to the video, as it's we have an ongoing criminal prosecution, but we also have an active ongoing investigation. And so, Monsieur Fortin, it's very difficult to speak directly to any evidence or any information that may prejudice the criminal prosecution.
Thank you. I understand that we cannot talk about the video, so I won't talk about it. But I will ask you, were you only aware of the video in June 2024, or did the government learn about it earlier? Again, Mr. Fortin, I want to be very cautious. I can say to you, and I said in my opening remarks, that the moment that the government became aware of a threat, an elevated threat level, took place in June 2024. The details of who had access to what documents or what evidence. So it was really in June of 2024, Minister? The problem, Mr. Fortin, is that this is the precise sort of information which, as Mr. Larkin said, could end up in a criminal trial. That is why I'm being very cautious. I understand. But the effectiveness of our security services is being questioned here. At any rate, thank you, Chair.
May I raise a point of order, please, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Caputo on a point of order.
Yes, thank you. It's been raised a number of times here that we only got access to this chronology that really should have been in our hands weeks ago. And I'm wondering, I believe that we probably have agreement from most people, but I would propose that the minister stay for 1 extra hour here, depending on his availability, because I think that there are still a number of questions to be answered. And we are also not hearing from the Minister of Immigration this week, which was part of our motion, and we haven't had an explanation for that either. Thank you.
Well, Minister LeBlanc doesn't answer to that question. That's for us. We did invite Mr. Miller, but he was unavailable. So I have an understanding that the minister can stay for a short while longer. I had envisioned 2 more 5-minute slots.
Mr. McKinnon, you may have the wrong understanding. I'm happy to be here. I agreed to come for 1 hour. I am leaving on a flight for New Brunswick, going almost straight to the airport with 1 stop at the Public Safety Department to sign a particular document. And I'm going to be spending tomorrow morning getting my monthly immunoglobulin treatment to boost my immune system, which I get. I don't intend to miss that, and I don't intend to miss the flight. So that being said, I'm happy to take a few more questions, but I cannot stay an hour. I've been an opposition MP too. I get exactly what Mr. Caputo is doing. We've certainly released all of the documents the moment they were prepared by the justice officials and that we could rely on them. So there's certainly no attempt to wait. The documents had to be translated. We wanted to, of course, respect that rule. But I don't know, Mr. Chair, if there is another few minutes. But I see that we're over 11 o'clock, and I will have to leave very shortly.
Thank you, Minister. So to finish the second round, we would do one more 5-minute question from the Conservatives and one from the Liberals. Would you be able to say for 10 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. That being the case, we'll go with Mr. Brock for 5 minutes.
Minister, 2 weeks ago, actually 16 days ago, the Prime Minister notified Canada that his government is taking the case very seriously. He secondly said this is a very serious situation that you, sir, as the Minister of Public Safety, would be doing a full follow-up to understand exactly how this happened. The Minister will share all that we learned in the appropriate moment. That was 16 days ago. You've indicated the process by which you've disclosed this 5-page document to committee, literally 20 minutes before the commencement. In my former career as a Crown attorney, if I tried to pull something like this in front of a judge, I would get a severe tongue lashing. This is not procedural fairness. This is highly, highly suspicious in terms of the timing by which you release that. So, moving on. I too want to talk about the video, the notorious video from 2015. According to Global News, they easily obtained a copy of that. It appeared to match the one that resulted in the aggravated assault charge that the RCMP recently laid. It shows a prisoner wearing an orange jumpsuit and suspended from a pole in a desert. A man wearing a black robe and a cap bearing the ISIS logo then hacks at the prisoner's limbs with a sword, cutting off his hands, cutting off his feet. His face briefly visible, he appears to be a middle-aged man with a henna-tinted beard. It is unclear whether the victim was already dead when he was dismembered. The video, titled "Deterring Spies," was published in June 2015 by the media arm of the ISIS branch in western Iraq, according to an expert. Now, we know that Mr. Eldidi received his citizenship in September 2023. I'm looking at the chronology under security screening note. Application was referred to CSIS for security checks in November 2023. CSIS returned a favorable recommendation. What type of message does that send to Canadians regarding our national security agency with a video that was widely distributed some 8 years previous, was not flagged against any advanced biometrics? The man's face was clearly visible. Is CSIS not tracking these videos? What other terrorists are walking the streets here in Canada right now waiting to commit terrorist acts on innocent Canadians? What the hell is going on?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Brock, I would also think that when in your previous job as a Crown attorney, you would be commenting with the benefit of parliamentary privilege on something that you know very well may form part of an evidence, part of the evidence in an upcoming criminal trial. As the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP said, I'm not sure you would, on the steps of a courthouse in the middle of an ongoing trial, have been as dramatic as you were for your social media clip now.
Sir, Minister, I am not a Crown attorney right now. I am a parliamentarian asking the tough questions that Canadians want to know. Why did our National Security Agency not flag this video 8 years prior and used the image of this terrorist, if not killer, who's dismembering limbs from the person in a pole. Why was that image not flagged against every other asylum claimant to ensure that there was adequate security checks being done? According to your note, CSIS cleared this individual, returning a favorable recommendation. How did that slip through? How did that slip through, sir?
So again, you're referring to alleged dramatic images.
It's not alleged. It happened. The video is not alleged.
I think we should be careful talking about criminal evidence, but as I said in my opening comments, and Ted Gallivan is going to be able to give you some precision with respect to the video and how security screening agencies came into possession of that information. At the time when the relevant decisions were being made by the Immigration Department and the security services were doing their work, the existence of that video or the information that you have recounted to the committee now was not available. And I think Mr. Gallivan can provide some precision in terms of why that was the case.
Well, it begs the question as to why.
Mr. Brock, that's enough. I think we should let Mr. Gallivan speak after the minister's gone. And we will go now to Ms. DeMoff.
Since we got elected in 2015, I'm quite proud of the investments that we've made. I wonder if you and perhaps the heads of the different agencies could comment. Actually, and before I go, Ms. Lloyd, I'd like to congratulate you on your new role, leading an agency that does such important work for Canadians. Can you, in spite of the fear-mongering that's been going on here, can Canadians have confidence in our agencies, and can Canadians feel safe that we are that we have the tools and continuing evolving tools to deal with these kind of terrorist threats?
Ms. Damoff, thank you for the question. I'm happy to see you as well at this committee again. You did important work here in your role as a parliamentary secretary on many of these issues. Our government has sought to increase resources, for example, to CSIS. One of the most significant investments in both technology and capacity at CSIS happened in the budget 2024 a few months ago. I think all of us should be very proud as parliamentarians and our colleagues in the other place as well for adopting Bill C-70, which gave for the first time in decades new authorities for CSIS in a digital age. So to comments about the existence of videos on a dark web, I think it's important, Ms. Damoff, for people to understand, and I hear this from the security agencies. I have never been myself on the dark web looking for these kind of videos. It's called the dark web precisely because these kind of videos don't normally come with credits and contact information at the end of it. So the idea that there's some simple way that security agencies and partners around the world are able to have access to the sickeningly thousands and millions of images of this kind of thing, that's why partnerships are so important. That's why working with the 150 other countries that Vanessa described is the best way for CSIS and their partners in the RCMP and CBSA to do this work. So they need access to the technology. They need legislative authorities, which this Parliament gave them a few months ago, which is terrific. And they need their government to support them with the funds necessary to modernize. I believe that work is being done. I'm lucky enough with this super interesting job I have to see that work up close every week and every month. And as I said in my opening comments, Ms. Damoff, when I was briefed by CSIS on July 24th, and when Deputy Commissioner Larkin and his colleagues Mark Flynn and Commissioner Duhem updated me on the 28th of July that these people were in custody, the successful arrest had been made, it reminded me of the remarkable work done by these women and men in the agencies represented here, the danger of their work, and the value of working constructively with partners around the world. Because if we're not constructive and if we're reckless in releasing information, discussing origins of information, commenting on media reports of certain images and the existence of evidence that may end up forming part of a criminal prosecution. We'll increasingly be unable to get that information. We won't look like the reliable partner that we are with those agencies. I heard from the director of MI6 himself, the chief, in London, about how much he values the work that CSIS does and the information that CSIS gives MI6. I thought that was reassuring for Canadians to know that somebody as interesting in the world as the chief, he would be C in the films that we've all seen. When Sir Richard Moore told me that they are absolutely dependent on CSIS and other partners, it told me the system is working quite well.
I know my time is up, Chair. The Conservatives voted against every investment that we've made in these security agents over the last 9 years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Demoff. And thank you, Minister. Safe travels. And thank you for being here and having the forbearance to bear with us a little longer.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and thanks to colleagues, and I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. I'll be in your province, in the great city of Nanaimo, I guess in 10 days. But thank you, colleagues, for taking time in the middle of a non-sitting week to join us, and thank you for the invitation.
And BC is the best province to come to in this. Thank you.